this is Roger, thanks for dropping by and welcome to the first part of the 2021 Project Orchids. Now this will be a 4-part set done in March, beginning of the growing season, literally right at the start. Today we hit 11 hours, so it's officially the start of the growing season. And we've selected our plants a while back. Some of those selections were participated in, some were overridden. But anyway, we've got our 4 sets of plants, and we will look at them through March. So we'll get, you know, the first part, which I'm going to call these an initial look, and then the next set. So where are we? March, April, May, June. The next set of videos will be in June, and that will be the part 1 updates. Then in September is the part 2 updates, and then at the end of the year we will do the final updates and see how they've done throughout the year. So it's a series, 4 parts in each set, and we're starting with the Oncidium Alliance in part 1. So let's make a start. Right, plant number 1 has a problem. It's lost a growth. Now this hasn't been out of his pot since I got it, and that could be a problem. Now this is the Miltoniopsis species, roezlii, variety xanthina, crossed back with roezlii. So lost that growth. I'm not. In fact, as we're starting the project with a relatively problem-looking plant, let's get it out of the pot. Now, obviously, I'm going to try not to make a mess on my black cloth, but I can't be bothered to set the tripod up and all that sort of stuff. I'm just going to turn the camera off. I'll get this out of its pot, and then we'll inspect it, and obviously I'll get it up, potted up again later today. So this is as I said, this is an initial look. Well, in this case, let's have an initial look in the pot. Okay, what we've got here is a plant that looks like it was in a peat type mix. It wasn't cleaned off properly when it was potted. It was put in what I would call relatively large bark for a plant with very few roots, and it hasn't grown roots since then. So for this plant to progress, it needs to now grow some roots, which will probably come with its next new growth. I've taken that old pseudo-bulb off. Yeah, so I think when this was potted up, it wasn't really cleaned up very well and got into a nice position. Plus, I would say that's a bit big for a plant like this. So I will get this potted up later. I'm not going to bother filming that, it's just one plant. And what it will go in is it will go in coconut husk, chopped up very small with the scissors, because the stuff I've got is quite large, which for a lot of plants is brilliant, but not for this one. I will give this a wash under the tap, see if I can get some more of that. You can see that peaty stuff at the bottom there, and because that has sat around the base of the plant, it stays wet right around the base of the plant. This is not what we need. So I'll give it a rinse off, get as much of the old stuff off as possible, and I'm going to pop that up in the coconut husk, chopped up very fine, and that will give it a mix with some air that also holds moisture. Therein lies the difference between a peaty type of stuff, which holds moisture but has no air and stays wet for far too long. So we will try and recover it, but it's not starting off very well. The only good thing about this, being a Miltoniopsis, I worry about my summer temperatures, is this one normally is found growing lower down than the other Miltoniopsis species. So it's actually more heat tolerant, so it shouldn't mind quite so much. But okay, so what we would hope from this, having repotted it, is some new root growth, which I don't think we're going to get from the existing root system. That looks gone to me. So we are dependent on this using its stored reserves, which are not brilliant, to actually create a new growth and start some new roots. That may or may not work. So that's that one. Right, this one is the Odontoglossum naevium, and this is the one that came from Jeff's. And when we took it out of the pot, there was a lot of rot, and removing that, we ended up with many smaller pieces, and all of those smaller pieces were bundled up and potted together in a clump with the hope of getting some roots. Well, we've got some new roots starting now in various places. Yeah, so some of these pieces will be fine and some of them might not be. Depends whether they get their roots growing or not. Now this was potted up in the cocoa husk. Can't remember whether I mixed some bark in with it, probably, knowing me. Although maybe not, being an odont, likes to stay moist. Moist and cool for these. So it needs to get these roots going before it starts getting too hot in here. Well, quite honestly, the weather we've had recently, it's already getting hot in here. But the problem in the summertime is incessant hot weather, day after day after day, with no relief. Now, we've just had 3 warm days. Great. Well, there's no sign of any heat today. You know, it's just a cloudy day. So they've got some relief today. It's not going to be as warm. Okay, so what I would expect from this is continued root growth. It's started, so that needs to continue. The growths that the new roots are coming from are young growths, in other words, new growth. So I would expect those to push on and hopefully at least some of them mature a decent sized pseudobulb. And who knows, they may even bloom. But to get this going into a nice pot full of strong pieces, I would probably stop any blooms that started up. So that's the position with this. It's all strapped so that it doesn't wobble about too much, and we have got signs of roots coming out in various places. So we'll see how much that progresses in the next 3 months, given it, you know, as I said, we are coming into the start of the main growing season, so it should get going a bit quicker from now on. And the next one isn't. When we selected this, I don't think I'd actually got round to doing this, and when it came out of the pot it was in a bad state, virtually no roots, and as a consequence I decided to mount it, but it was in pieces, so I thought, well, we'll try it on separate mounts, because it was quite a large plant. There's a lot of it, but it ended up in pieces. So what we've got to do today is choose one to continue with. Now these 2 little pieces here were 3 and the one in the middle failed, so that's already gone. I don't see those 2 growing, quite honestly. They are so shriveled. If you look at the cross section of those pseudobulbs, they've got no life left in them at all. Now that one may shoot out from the base on one or other of those pieces, possibly both, but it's never going to be a good plant, not for some considerable time, and these pieces will only do good if they grow a strong growth with a reasonable sized pseudobulb and some roots, because these are never going to plump up, so there's no energy in there at all. Now this piece, I think it was just one piece, got plonked on the top of a mount, so that it had plenty of downward area to grow the roots in. Again, pseudobulbs incredibly badly shriveled, but not quite as bad as the one we've just looked at. There's no sign of new roots or new growths yet, but I would suspect this one to pick up once it gets some new growths and some new roots going. Now this is 2 pieces, one on top of the other. So there's quite a large piece with some good strong leaves on the top, sitting at the top, and there is some roots on that piece. They're old, but they're there. And then there's a smaller piece strapped on a bit farther down. And if you've got good eyes, that is the first sign of a new growth on any of these pieces. Just there's a tiny little new growth starting. So I'm going to choose this piece for us to follow on. It's several pieces. It's probably the one that's going to progress the quickest. That's the way I look at it. So there'll be something to see, whereas on the others there won't be much. And the first thing we're going to see is that. Yeah. That's part of the reason the plant went downhill. Now, just for observation, when I get a problem, I like to go to town with it so that people get a chance to see. Now, what made me open that leaf up? Those pale patches. That's the damage that the scale have done, right down in the crease there. And they will go right down into one of their favourite places where a flower spike has been. So I now need to cut that leaf and that flower spike as close to that new growth as I can get it and give it a spray. And I suspect that leaf has got them as well, yep. So you can see from the outside, you can see the pale patches that they leave. Okay, so that needs a good clean up. I suspect they're in there as well. Yep, so a good clean up, spray with my contact insecticide, and these leaves will come off. That I know it sounds daft, but the simplest way to remove scale that are infested badly in a leaf joint like that is to take the leaf off. Then they're gone. And just spray what's left, if you see what I mean. So we'll choose this one to follow, and we'll see how it picks up, but it's not going to pick up anywhere near as quick with scale still on it. So we'll need to deal with that now. Right, something a bit bigger now. This is Rossioglossum Rawdon Jester. This has been repotted, excuse me, and had virtually no roots, but it had some signs of some new ones starting. And we do have some progress on those new roots. There's one there heading down into the pot, and there's a couple of new ones starting up here that will also go down into the pot. The ones that are in the pot are not very good at all. Now when we got this had 4 new growths at the front, and if it's going to bloom, I would imagine it's going to bloom off of those 4 new growths. Now I owned this once and I did actually have blooms on it, but I can't for the life of me remember where the spikes come from. Do they come from the base? Obviously the new roots do, which is good. Or I can't imagine they come from up here, quite honestly. This is a strange one because when the growths are very, very young, they look like normal Oncidium types. But then as they grow, they don't produce any leaves down the bottom of the pseudobulb. Yeah, the only leaves proper that they get are sticking straight out the top. So you can understand why this isn't just an Oncidium. It's been given a different name, yeah, because it does grow differently. So, as I say, we may get some blooms on this, we may not, but my main priority is to establish a good root system on this. The one I had before, that one stayed in its pot too long and lost its root system and would not grow. I think I spent about 2 years trying to recover that, and it wouldn't have it, and in the end it got dumped. So this one I'm hoping for better things, but yet again we're starting out with a poor root system. But it's starting to grow a new one, so let's just hope it pulls on. Blooms on this are absolutely stunning. There's somebody has actually got a video, recent video up with one of these opening up as a time lapse, which is nice. But the blooms are huge. You know, as Oncidium types go, these are some of the largest. They are, 4 or 5 inches across on a good blooming. So very large, very colourful. Reds, bright yellows, yeah. So that's the state of play with this one. New roots starting, 4 new growths that have matured that are nice and plump, some older bulbs that are still reasonably plump and are still fully leaved. So we have a good set of leaves on this plant, so it can feed itself really well. So we'll see how that one progresses, but as I say, initial thing is let's get a root system. We'll worry about blooms and things later. If all 4 of those new growths decided to bloom, I wouldn't let them. I might let one so that we get to see the blooms, but we'll have to wait and see. It's possible that actually repotting it has disturbed it enough that it'll decide not to bloom now. It'll decide to come back into vegetative growth. But we'll wait and see. I mean, it's not a bad looking plant. These can get quite tatty looking as they age, especially as the older bulbs start to lose their leaves. But I've got no leafless bulbs on here. All the bulbs have got leaves on. So as these plants go, this is not a bad one. Not bad at all. So we'll see how that pushes on. Again, Rossioglossums closely aligned with Odontoglossums. They like to stay cooler. They like some air movement, and they don't like bright light on those leaves. So that's that one. Right, the next one is Tolumnia Peach, and I was actually going to strip this one off its mount and redo it. On the grounds it's got an old tired part to the plant over here. Yeah? And guess where the latest growth is coming? Down in there on the end of my thumb, if you can't see it. So it may start to grow this side of the plant now. We shall see. But most of the rest of the plant is looking okay. That's the latest, strongest fan there. That will bloom soon, I suspect. There's another one up the back there looking good. That may bloom as well. That also has a new growth starting at the base, which you should be able to see there. And this one is a nice new growth as well. So we've got that new growth, this one maturing, and then we've got our tiny little one starting over there as far as brand new growths are concerned. So we should get some blooms on this in the not too distant future. Now, as we just looked at an Oncidium and I saw a pale patch on a leaf, I've just seen another pale patch on a leaf. And this time it's okay. But you see what I'm getting at? That could easily be scale. What I suspect that is it was scale and it's been treated. And obviously the pale patch is never going to go away. So, yeah, so I had a clear out with my Tolumnias. 4 Tolumnias were in my notes that no longer exist. So we're basically down to 2 old ones that I've had for some time. I've just seen another new growth starting, I think, in the dead centre. We've got this one and another large one, which is the sunrise, sunset, sunray thing I can never remember the name of. And then we've got the 4 new ones that I got that were in the Schwerter order, 2 of which I chose and 2 were part of my birthday present treat. So yeah, so we're down to the 4 new ones, 2 large old ones and 2 smaller old ones. So we've now got 8. At one point I had 15, but the scale had them, and they don't take to it. They get in the base of the fan and they will destroy the fan. The leaves just fall off at the base and then it's just gone. So you need to go very careful with these. So there we go. As I say, we should get some blooms on that soon. I think we had 3 spikes at the same time last time round. I don't know whether that will happen again. As some of the new growths are, just literally a tiny little green speck at the moment, whereas one is, virtually mature and should bloom very soon. So there we go, that's the Tolumnia. Right, and the last one in this set is a strange one. It is in the Oncidium Alliance, but it does have a very strange name. The genus is Mexicoa, and I think that's pronounced ghiesbreghtiana. Because the GH won't sound, will it? So you've got like geese at the beginning. There's another H in there. GHIES. I would imagine that's geese or gaies. And then Brett, BREGHT, and then Iana on the end. Well, that's what I'm going for anyway. Now this arrived mounted and hasn't been touched. What it has done is grown some new roots from this area, some of which are aerial. Quite a few are down in that nice piece of live moss. We've got some leafless pseudo bulbs around the back and some older bulbs with leaves on. And we have a nice strong new growth pushing out there. And then there's another one in the middle of the plant, which is going to be difficult for you to see. It's near the end of my thumb, just there. Yeah, so we've got 2 new growths started on it. And we'll see how it progresses. It's doing okay. I don't know how mature a plant that is. Is that a mature plant and it's a miniature? Or is it just a very young plant and needs to grow some big bulbs before we get any blooms? So you know, this is the shot in the dark. I don't know what it's supposed to look like. I don't know what it's going to do next, apart from hopefully grow those 2 new growths into good sized bulbs and produce some more new roots. It has produced a few. There are some growing tips. Some have gone down in the moss, and we'll see how we get on. It's a plant I'd never heard of, for a start, and have had trouble pronouncing it ever since. But this one will be an interesting one to watch, because I doubt if there's many people around that have got it, and I would imagine there's a very high percentage of people that have never heard of it. So it'll be an interesting one to follow through and see what happens. But I predict that all that's going to happen is it's going to grow those 2 new growths, hopefully up to full size, with some roots, and that's probably all it will do in the time it's got, you know, to the end of this growing season. But yeah, an interesting one, that, very interesting. Okay, so that's part 1 done. I reckon Hector doing his thing. It's funny actually, it's working fine now. When I first switched this back on, I was watching it and I thought, that is not chucking out anywhere near as much fog as it should be, and the little pipe was partially blocked. I had to get a bit of wire and poke it right down through the whole length of the stuff. There was quite a lot of sort of sediment and that came out, so so obviously it wasn't getting the water in there fast enough, but it is now. So that's the end of part 1. Parts 2, 3 and 4 will follow on in the not too distant future, but I don't like doing these sorts of things close together. And as far as these initial look videos are concerned, they're very easy for me to produce because I haven't got the stills from the previous update to bring in. So all I've really got to do with these is join the clips together, put the plant names on, and a pop-up of the blooms if I've got one. So you will only see pop-ups of blooms if I've got it to flower. Yeah, I don't take pictures off the internet under normal circumstances. So we will only see blooms on the ones that I've had blooms on, basically. And see you in the next part. Thanks for dropping by.